perfect. Okay, fantastic. I will try to do that. Raise the volume on my... Okay, is that better for you? Okay, perfect. All right, so our topic today is the IELTS exam. Some of you, I imagine, will have done the exam before, and some of you are hoping to do the exam in the future. So we're going to talk a little bit about it, and then at the end, I will give you the opportunity to ask a few questions, and I will try to answer them. All right. I don't want you to forget your questions, so if you have a notepad and a question comes to your mind, please make a note of it so that at the end we can talk about all the questions. All right, so let's get started. And of course, the IELTS exam stands for the International English Language Testing System. And some of you may also be aware of the TOEFL exam. It's a bit similar. There are some differences, but people who are more familiar with American English or want to attend American universities often do the TOEFL exam. Right, so we won't be talking about the TOEFL a lot today, but if you do have questions about the TOEFL, we can consider those a bit later on. All right, so what is the IELTS exam and why would anyone want to take that exam? So as we said, it's the International English Language Testing System, and there are two types. The first one would be the General IELTS, and the second will be the Academic IELTS. People who take the General IELTS exam are people who just want to have an idea of their English skill. How good am I? You know, do I speak English well? Do I understand it well? Also, if you want to move to an English-speaking country, you can do the General IELTS exam. There are some jobs as well that require just that general understanding of English, so they would be happy to have a General IELTS grade from you. That exam is a little bit easier, to be honest. The academic exam is specifically geared for study in an English university. So it helps you to prepare, and it gives your university a very good idea of your areas of strength and weakness within the English language, right? So we'll be focusing today on the academic IELTS because the general IELTS, if you can do the academic, you can definitely do the general IELTS exam. It wouldn't be a problem at all. All right. So the academic IELTS is split into four parts. There's the speaking section, the listening, the reading, and the writing section. So four very specific parts. And there is a 9-band scoring system. When we talk about a 9-band system, what we're referring to is a system where each area, so speaking and listening, reading and writing, each area is graded out of 9 marks, right? So you will get a grade out of 9 for each section. And then your final grade will be the average of all of the sections. So people can generally get, well, you can really get any score at the end, 4, 5, 6, but really our aim, because we want to go to university, our aim will be at least a 7. Most universities require a 7, but of course we want to aim a bit higher, so we might try to get an 8 or even a 9. All right, so we're really aiming for the best with this IELTS course, and as I mentioned, most universities require a 7. There are some universities that will accept a 6, but when you're applying to that university, when you're finding out their requirements, you will have to ask them what their IELTS requirement is. What do they expect you to get in order to be accepted into the university, right? Okay, so we were talking about the scores. The university is requiring a 7, and everyone in the group here aiming for at least an 8. Yeah. But how do you get that high score? How do you get that 7 or that 8? It's a very important question because, of course, we all want to succeed at our exam. All right, so the idea, because we spoke about the 4 sections, speaking, reading, writing, and listening, and the aim will be to get consistent scores. So we don't want a 4 in listening and then an 8 in speaking. What we want would be a 7, an 8, a 7, an 8, that kind of thing. Consistent scores within each of the sections. Right? In order to get those consistent scores, it is very important, it's necessary for us to become familiar with the test, understand how the test is laid out, understand the timing, how much time you should spend in each area, and get to know the tips, get to know the exam strategies, the way that you would deal with each of the sections. Because, of course, the way that we would approach the reading exam will be different to the way that we will approach the listening part or the writing part of it. All right? It's very important to expand our vocabulary because especially in the listening, we're just welcoming someone else, sorry, especially within the listening part, actually within all the parts, there will be a lot of synonym use. So we want to be familiar with a lot of vocabulary, and that is going to be an important part of our preparation, expanding our vocabulary. In the reading section, we will have to be able to identify the keywords that will help us to get the answers. You know, because our time will be limited, we wouldn't want to spend too much of our time reading the entire passage. We want to be able to skim, to scan, to identify the keywords in the passages. All right, and one very important thing that I have mentioned, I'm sure, in this section is using our time well, using our preparation time well, and ultimately using our time in the exam, using our time well in the exam. The examiners have given us a guideline of how much time we should spend in each area of the exam. So that is very useful because, of course, they know how long it should take. And so if we're able to follow their guideline as closely as possible, it would increase our chances of success. All right? So a lot of you might be wondering, how long will it take me to really prepare for this exam? And the truth is that the preparation time varies. I have seen people who have never done the exam get prepared in 3 months. But of course, that is preparation with daily study. You attend classes and you may also do a lot of private or personal study. And for others who are repeating the exam, of course, it may take them less time if they are focusing a lot on their weak areas and then increasing their practice, increasing practice papers, increasing their understanding of exam strategies. So I believe that most, if not all of you, are students at the moment. So you may have jobs, you may also be studying, or you may be studying full time. So it may not be possible, you know, for you to spend 3 hours every day in a class preparing for IELTS, but we can find a way to fit it into our schedules and then approach the exam in that way. Of course, there are some people who can prepare for ages and they still don't do as well as they'd like, because what is most important, as I've written there, is dedication and commitment. So once you're dedicated and you're committing to really putting in the time and focusing on your weaker areas, trying to improve those, and then understanding how the exam is laid out, you should be fine. All right. Let's have a look at what the exam includes. Yeah, so what are these specific areas of the exam? So some people wonder when they can take this exam. In many cases, all other exams that we do in our lives, you may just have 1 or 2 opportunities, maybe in June and December, or just maybe 2 times a year. The IELTS exam is actually run 48 times each year. Of course, in your local center where you will take the exam, they may not have as many as 48 exams, but they will have a few. Yeah, so you have the opportunity. If you can't do it this month, then maybe you can do it next month or the month after. So you don't have to wait 6 months to have an opportunity to actually try the exam, or to try it again if you want to improve your grade. All right, the test is 2 hours and 45 minutes. So it's not as long as the TOEFL exam. The TOEFL exam is 4 hours. So that's an interesting point. But this one is just 2 hours and 45 minutes. Right? The listening, reading, and writing are usually done on the same day, and sometimes, in some cases, depending on the number of students that are taking the exam, the speaking exam cannot be done on the same day. So in that case, we would usually do the speaking exam within 7 days, within 1 week of your listening, reading, and speaking and writing exams. Yeah, so if you don't get the speaking exam on the same day, don't worry, it will happen within 1 week. Right? Let's look a little bit at what each exam entails. So the listening exam takes 40 minutes in total. You have 30 minutes to listen and to make your notes with the answers, and then there is a separate answer sheet. So they give you 10 minutes to transfer your answers from your notes to the answer sheet. Within the listening exam, there are 4 sections, and you have just about 10 questions for each section. Right? In order to get a level 7 grade, we basically need to get 30 to 32 marks out of the 40. Yeah, so 30 to 32 points out of the 40 in total. Right? These questions, these 10 questions per section, actually increase in difficulty. So the first section might be fairly simple, fairly easy, but the questions get a bit more difficult with each, as we move on to each section. And it's an important thing to note that each recording is only played once. So we really have to forget all distractions and focus on the listening for that period of time. All right? We are given an opportunity, maybe I think it's about 30 seconds, to read the questions before you listen, so that you have an idea of what they're expecting, what to look for when you actually listen to the recording. All right? The reading section is 60 minutes in total. It's made up of 3 parts with a total of 40 questions. So there are 3 different texts to read, and there'd be 13 or 14 questions per section. What's interesting about the reading exam, or or the reading portion of the exam is that the topics are usually things that we have never heard about before. Sometimes the topics are quite strange. So a lot of people, they look at the title and they think, oh no, I don't know anything about this. But that is really something that we shouldn't worry about at all, because what we will be preparing to do is to pick out information, not necessarily to understand every single word in a passage. All right, so that will be our focus in the course. All right. The questions vary, the question types vary. So you may have true, false, or not given questions. You would have gap fills. You would have select the correct answer. So there will be various types of questions to really test your skills. Okay, earlier on, I mentioned that skill that we will have to develop, that skill of selecting the keywords and skimming and scanning through exercises. So that is something that will help us with this reading portion of the exam. Okay. Moving on to the writing portion, right? Again, 60 minutes. This one is split into two parts. The first one, they suggest that you take about approximately 20 minutes to complete this. It's about 150 words. They generally suggest that you try not to write too much less. You can write a little more, but avoid writing a lot less. So let's say 130 to 170. Interestingly, the examiner, when they're reading your script, they do not read past a certain amount. So if you write 200 words, they will probably still stop reading at 170. So we want to be conscious in our practice of, for example, how much space 130 words or 150 words actually takes up in our handwriting. Yeah, so we know when we're getting close to the total. All right, that first task is going to be an infographic task. It's a diagram analysis. They give you a diagram and they're asking you to describe it, to analyze it, to give information about what has been presented. In this first task, they are not asking for your opinion. All right, so we will want to avoid things like I think or I believe, because they're not asking for your opinion, they just want the facts about the diagram. In the second task, you have approximately 40 minutes. It's about 250 words, and this one varies. It's asking for your opinion. They will present a problem or a solution situation to you, or they might give you some advantages or disadvantages task. So they may say, to what extent do you agree that, and you will then share your view on that particular topic, your view or perhaps a general view, and then you share your view. But we will look at that in the course as well. When they're grading the writing exam, they look at your fluency, how smoothly your scripts can be read. They look at how coherent you are. And of course, they look at things like grammar, spelling, your answer's relevance to the question, and of course the complexity, how complex your written structures are. And each of these areas will be graded to give you your final score. All right. Okay, so the last section of the exam will be the speaking portion, and this will be 12 to 14 minutes. In part 1, they will ask you general questions, just about yourself, find out more about you, your interests. Yeah. And in that section, which is just 3 to 4 minutes, they will want you to expand on your answers. So don't just answer yes or no. All right, we want to be able to share a bit more, to give reasons for our answers, and to give details when we're answering. In part 2, the questions will be printed on a card and they will be handed to you. You will have 1 minute to prepare, and they'll be asking you to describe something. Yeah, so for example, describe a festival in your city, or anything really they could ask you to describe. Within that description, you'll have 1.5 to 2 minutes to answer this question in part 2. And again, here they'd be looking for fluency, the accuracy of your comments, the variety of language that you use, yeah, variety of tenses, variety of vocabulary, etc. And then we have part 3, where we'll have a question and answer, and the question and answer will be related to the topic that was raised in part 2. Sometimes, because they try to be a bit more in depth in this part 3, the questions could be a bit controversial. Yeah, so there could be various issues that some people may feel quite strongly about. So this will be your opportunity to really express how you feel about something. Right? Okay, so the VMA IELTS course is really going to be run with the primary aim of helping you to improve and to achieve your desired score. So if you want to achieve a 7 or an 8, we would like to help you to do that. The course will be run 2 days a week, Thursday and Friday, for 12 weeks, starting next month. And of course, we will be considering and looking at all 4 of the areas. We have allocated, this is just approximate depending on the group and how people feel, but we'll be looking at spending over the 12 weeks, 14 hours on the listening portion, 14 on the reading, 10 hours or so on the writing, and 10 hours or so on the speaking. I'd like you to note though that the 10 hours spent on the writing will not include homework and your written assignments, and it will not include my marking of your assignments. Okay, so this is 10 hours in class focusing on the writing part of the course. Right. I know that you saw 14 hours of each of those and 10 hours. Don't think that we'd be doing 14 hours straight. Yeah, we want to, in each session, we want to spend some time looking at 1 or 2 areas, because it's impossible really to look at all 4 areas within a 2-hour session. That'll be, I think, a brain overload, and we don't want to spend all of our time on one area either. So in each session, we'll try to look at 1 or 2 depending on the material. We will focus on weaker areas, and to do that, in the initial stages, we will have a few diagnostic tests just to get an idea of how you feel about certain areas, how comfortable you are in certain areas. Your written work will be individually marked and assessed. We will be looking at sample papers as well as other material that will help us to strengthen particular abilities. So, for example, looking at a sample reading paper will be helpful, but the fact that the topics are always new is really something that we would be conscious of. So we'd give you exercises to really strengthen the reading skill, as opposed to focusing on a topic that was mentioned in a reading paper in the past. All right. There will be assessment and evaluation as we go through the course, and of course you will also be able to assess and evaluate your progress and your concerns. And naturally, there will be tips and suggestions to help you really go forward to the exam feeling quite comfortable and confident. All right. With regard to the details, the course starts on the 20th of March, and that will be a Thursday, and it's going to be run every Thursday and Friday from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. for 12 weeks. Right? So I'd like to invite you all to consider your schedules and consider the material that we've shared with you today. And of course, we'd be happy to have your questions now. Anything that you'd like to find out about the course or about the exam, we'd be able to consider that. All right, so if you wish to raise your hand to answer the question, to ask the question, or if you would like to write your question in the chat box, that would be fine as well. So let's hear from, I just saw a hand, it's disappeared now. Bushra, was that you? You can go ahead, yeah. Bushra, you have the mic, but I'm not hearing your voice, unfortunately. You can try pressing Alt and M, or I think it's Alt and M or Control and M. Control and M sometimes. There we go.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Mrs. Teneile, I think. But I just wanted to ask if there is any exam similar to IELTS when we finish the course. Can we take it?
Ah, there isn't. The idea of the course is to do the IELTS exam. We will be looking at practice exams so that you can have an idea of your competence, of your skill. But in terms of an official exam, no, there won't be an official one from VMA.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Good question, Ahmad. So Ahmad is asking which countries accept the IELTS exam and which ones accept the TOEFL exam. The TOEFL exam is generally accepted in the US and in Japan. All right. The IELTS exam will be acceptable in the UK, in Australia, in Singapore, and those countries. However, there are some US universities that will accept the IELTS exam. So really, if you have a university in mind, it's important to check with them to find out which exam they will accept. Because there are some that will say, no problem, you have the IELTS, and because they are aware of what the IELTS exam requires, they will be able to accept that as well. Yeah. Um, all right. Let's see. What about the websites that provide practice exams? There are a lot of those websites. There are lots of websites, lots of books. Yeah. So we will be using some of those during the course. Um, really, there are a lot. For example, the British Council website often publishes IELTS exam, the sample IELTS exams. Yeah, so you can certainly look at those. Right. Let's look at Khaled's question. What is better, TOEFL or IELTS? That is a tricky question. I'll tell you why. It really depends on, one, where you want to attend university, and two, what your preference is. For example, if you are used to looking at Hollywood movies and understanding US idioms and just US English, American English in general, then the TOEFL exam will probably be easier for you to write. The TOEFL exam is longer, it's 4 hours. You're expected to type your essays. So whereas with the IELTS exam, you can handwrite them. If you type very quickly, then the TOEFL exam may be best for you because you are required to type your essays. You can't write them at all. With the TOEFL exam as well, most of the questions are multiple choice. So I think you remember we spoke about the reading portion of the IELTS, where we have the gap fill, the true and false, the matching, all of those things. With the TOEFL, most of your questions are multiple choice. With the listening portion of the TOEFL exam, the reading, the listening portion is a lot longer. So your note-taking skills also have to be very good. All right. So yeah, there are differences. There are differences, and really the primary aim would be what your university requires. Because even if, or let's say the TOEFL exam will be easier for you, if the university that you want to attend does not accept TOEFL, then it doesn't make sense doing the TOEFL. We'd have to work maybe a little differently, work a little harder, and do the IELTS. Yeah. I think we mentioned, you're asking just a follow-up question there. Do they accept IELTS in the US? Some universities do. Some universities in the US do accept it. So the TOEFL is generally accepted in the US, but there are some that accept the IELTS, so you do have to check directly with the university that you want to attend to find out what they want. All right. Okay, the topics that usually come in the writing section. There is no usually. Yeah. Canada is both. Sorry. Canada will accept both depending on the university again, because a lot of the Canadian system is British. Yeah. So the IELTS exam is accepted in many, if not all, exams, all universities in Canada. I actually have 2 friends who are teaching IELTS in Canada. Yeah, so so that it's accepted in many of the Canadian universities. All right, the topics for, just going back to that question from Mahmoud, the topics in the writing section, they vary. Yeah, it's difficult to predict. I actually have a friend who is now trying to compare past exams and looking for patterns in the topics, but he has not been successful as yet, because the topics, they really vary. They could be really on anything where there can be a positive or negative perspective. All right, so what is your view on um, these days people are very focused on the environment and recycling and that sort of thing. So how important do you think it is for people to care about the environment? Or is it just something that we should leave our children? Questions along those lines, but they really vary. Is the test dependent on your general knowledge or memorization from some books? Okay, no problem. We've been looking at I'm just thinking about that question that you're asking. It's not really possible to memorize because there is so much variety in the topics. So for example, when we spoke about the reading exam, the fact that they pick a topic out of thin air for some of us. So for example, if your specialty is medicine, then you might find a topic in the exam that might be related to medicine, but there is no guarantee. Yeah. The thing as well is that the reading especially is something that cannot be predicted. We don't know what they're going to bring. And as well, the same is with the I think the only area that you can really kind of memorize for might be the first part of the speaking exam, where they're asking you just general questions about yourself and your family life and your interests. But other than that, it's really about your overall skill, your ability to listen, to pick out the keywords in the listening, to not panic when you don't understand a word or two. Because sometimes where it happens to me when I'm studying other languages, that when I'm reading a passage and I don't understand a word, I panic because I think, oh, I'm not going to understand anything, you know. But really, the idea is to have a general idea, a general view of each area. Let's hear from Abdullah. Sorry, I've seen your hand for a bit, and then we will take Hyla's question. Go ahead, Abdullah.
Thank you, Teneile, for your establishing this course, and we are needing for this course because we need to passing this exam. And my question is, how can I just improving my skills in, especially in the writing sections? I have some problem writing because you need to think, you need to just memorize some words, some sentence to establishing the sentence. And how my question is, how can I just improving my skills in writing section? Thank you.
I think that is a concern for many people. I've taught a number of writing classes, not only IELTS, but just general writing classes, and that is always a concern for a lot of people. The thing about writing is that it is improved in a number of ways. One of them, interestingly, is through reading, right? The other, because in this exam we will be focusing on things like problem solution, advantage, disadvantage, sharing your opinion, there are a number of ways or fixed ways that we can express our opinion. So really, when we have these particular layouts, so for example, you're looking at how am I going to lay out the first paragraph of my essay? What is it going to include? We focus on those things. We also focus on an essay plan. And essay planning isn't the easiest thing at the beginning. A lot of people think it's a waste of time, but it is very important because what it does is that even if it takes you 3 minutes in the beginning just to plan your essay quickly, it helps you to avoid repeating yourself. It helps you to avoid forgetting what you were going to write, and it gives your essay a clarity so that when you make your quick plan, you know that the first thing that I'm going to focus on is this. Number one will be the general statement. Number two, your pros. Number three, your cons. Number four, your conclusion. And you have an idea of what each section will include. Then all you have to focus on then is giving examples to support the statement that you've made, and of course making sure that your grammar and your punctuation is accurate. Yeah, but there is a format, of how we improve our writing. What we must do though is increase our reading, because what that does is that it exposes us to ways of writing, helps us to find our style, and it also exposes us to more vocabulary, which is always useful when we're writing. All right, so I think we allocated 10 hours, not including homework and my marking of your essays in the course. So that should give us a fair amount of time to really focus on how we plan quickly, because we won't have a lot of time in the exam. But once you get in the habit of planning, it happens very, very quickly. You begin thinking immediately about what you want to include, where you want to put it, and then we can proceed from there. All right, I hope that answers your question, Abdullah. Hailey was asking how will you assess writing and reading? The assessment for, I'm just looking at the time. I don't know how much time we have left, but the assessment for your writing, I'll be doing that individually. So you will write something for me. You'd have two options. You could either scan it and email it to me, or you can type it out and email it to me. I will make notes and also make suggestions that will help you to focus on any weak areas that you may have. With regard to the reading, the assessment of reading is really how you approach a particular document or a particular passage. Yeah. So, of course, you will realize that your reading has improved when you're able to answer the questions that they're asking, and when you're able to do so quickly, when you're able to pick out the important parts of a passage without getting burdened, or without becoming burdened with the entire passage or the words that we don't know. Yeah, so I'm not sure if that answers your question, but if you wish to clarify, you can. Okay, specific books. The thing about the books I've noticed is that there are so many of them on the market. So what I've been doing in preparation for the course is looking for um, specific materials. So I'm taking things from different books. Yeah, because if we look at the I think it was a British Council site I was looking at a few months ago. They were, or maybe it wasn't the British Council site, I can't remember, but they were pointing out that this particular book is good for reading, but it's not so good for the writing part of the exam. It doesn't give you, so we are kind of looking at doing that, picking things from different books that will be helpful. All right. The course starts on the 20th of March, which is a Thursday at 7 p.m. I think Abdullah is asking that question. And how will it begin? It will begin with diagnostics, really a bit of speaking, a reading passage, just to get a sense of where you are. And of course, if you have done the exam before and you know what areas concern you the most, please feel free to share those with me so that I will be able to tailor your a little bit more for you. Yeah, so there may be occasions when you may have different homework. I should tell you in advance. So if you realize that for example, someone mentioned just now that the writing has been a challenge for him, we will try to include a bit more for him in that particular area. All right. With regard to a certificate, I do not believe. Oh yes. Okay. So the VMA rep is telling us that you will get a certificate of attendance from the course. But really, your aim will be to do the exam and to get the best possible score. So that's what we will be focusing on together. All right. Any other questions? I saw a hand a while ago, but I'm not sure. It's disappeared now. Ah, sweet. I love that. I love that that attitude, Hyla. Getting that 9. That's really what we're aiming for. All right. Any other questions? Ah, oh, cool. Yeah, we had spoken a little bit about that. I can recap for you there. The differences between the TOEFL and the IELTS. There are a few differences. The time, for one, the IELTS exam is 2 hours, 45 minutes. The TOEFL exam will be 4 hours. The TOEFL exam is mostly multiple choice. So, for example, in the IELTS exam, the reading section, you have different kinds of questions, gap fills, true and false, matching. That is not the case with the TOEFL. With the TOEFL, you generally have multiple choice questions. With the listening portion of the TOEFL exam, you hear a lot more before you have a chance to answer. So the listening portion is really quite long, or at least it's longer than the IELTS listening. With the IELTS written exam, you write your answers to the essay. With the TOEFL exam, you have to type your answers to the essay. All right. The TOEFL exam in the reading. Oh, thank you. The TOEFL exam in the reading, there are 3 to 5 sections. In the IELTS, just 3 sections. In the listening exam, I think the listening might be the most significant area of difference, because in the TOEFL exam, it's 40 to 60 minutes of listening, and the listening, the portions, they come from lectures or different campus conversations, so things that people may talk about while they're on a university campus. Whereas with the IELTS, there is a wider range of topics, wider range of question types. Yeah, so that's an interesting point. The TOEFL exam, the written piece is longer. It's 300 to 350 words. There will be a lot more note taking as well. With the speaking exam, the response is recorded on a computer. So 40 to 45 seconds, you have 6 different questions based on short descriptions or conversations. All right. With the IELTS exam, you have an examiner, you have a person speaking to you, and you have that little introduction where you have a bit of small talk. It gives you a chance also to get comfortable, to relax before you do parts 2 and 3 of the exam, of the speaking test. Yeah. How are we? Any other questions? Kulud, I hope that's okay for you. If you No problem. All right. So the thing about the TOEFL exam is really, I think, as we mentioned, if the university that you want to attend requires that you do the TOEFL exam, then that is what you will need to do. Yeah. If the university accepts both, it is only then that you could think about your strengths. For example, if you type very quickly and you understand American English really well, yeah, so you've had a lot of exposure to American English, then you might want to do the TOEFL exam. Yeah, if you prefer to handwrite your essays and you're more comfortable with British English, then you would want to go for the IELTS exam. So the first thing to find out is, what does your university require? Yeah, or the universities that you're applying to, what do they ask you for? All right, any other questions? All right. Okay, so if we have no other questions, we'll wrap up here. Of course, if before the course begins, if you do have questions, you can certainly contact me through the VM Academy. All right, and they can forward your questions to me. All right. So thank you so very much, everyone, for taking the time out of your day today to review, or to join us rather, to hear a little bit about the exam. And we look forward to seeing you when the course begins. All right. You've just received an email address there to forward your questions if you have them. All right, so I wish you all the best, and we look forward to seeing you when the course begins. Have a great evening.